Yeah, it's still a formality because all the work has been done effectively. The votes apparently have been sealed in the state legislatures itself. They'll meet tomorrow morning and basically sign off, seal it, and then it goes to the Senate and the US Congress. So the dates are as follows: December 14th, meeting of the Electoral College; December 23rd, deadline of the receipt of the ballots in Congress, and then January 6th is when the counting and the official registration, if you will, of the vote takes place
Mm.
in the Congress, where Mike Pence may be on the spot to basically, side with the law or collude with his boss.
Yeah.
Okay. So there seems to be many experts are describing this as a failed coup attempt, a slow moving coup, right, in the last 40, 50 days or so.
Yeah.
And looks like President Trump is going to continue to do this even in absentia as he leaves office. It doesn't seem like he's has any plans of conceding at this point, which is really unprecedented in recent history. And we don't know, what's going to lead to.
Dr. Sharma, how sure are we that the 538 so-called electors that make up the Electoral College, that they're
Mhm.
going to vote in the way that the states voted in the end, when it all came,
Right.
306 to Biden, 232 to Trump? How sure are we that that vote will go the way the tally ended up after election?
Yeah, historically, I think it's pretty sure. So these are electors that have been picked by respective parties, but there could be some defections or what's called the faithless electors
Mm.
phenomena, where they don't necessarily feel attached to the party or loyalty to the party, and then they're able to, vote against their constituency, if you will.
Mm.
That does happen. It's not a major, vote block that could move because there's, uh, President-elect Biden has a fairly large margin here at this point.
Mm.
Um, but we could see some defections, definitely. And I believe, based on the stories that I've seen recently, after the Supreme Court basically nullified the case by Texas, but 17 or 18 attorney generals had also signed on to this case against four states, right? Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia, to nullify Biden's win. That case has been thrown out, but in the last couple of days, there has been an attempt to discuss among Republicans how to further challenge on January 6th, possibly, to try to obstruct in Congress or in the Senate, um, Biden's, uh, you know, ultimate kind of victory
Yeah.
in both the houses. And then, of course, the inaugural is on the 20th of January.
Yeah, I mean, you talked earlier about Pence come January 6th being in that position to either side with the law or, collude with Trump. And that's exactly what many Republicans have done to this point. In fact, just to your comment just now as well.
Yes, so I think Mitch McConnell was asked about this as well, and several of the more right-leaning news owners and broadcasters have also been asked, and they've all said, at least on tape, that they will respect the Electoral College vote when it's signed and recorded in U.S. Congress, the Senate and the U.S. Congress. But it remains to be seen. So there are a few congressmen who are planning to obstruct the ultimate, signage, if you will, of the vote in Congress.
Yeah.
But that remains to be seen. But there will be some moving around, some machinations. But I think the lead on the part of Mr. Biden is large enough that it will not create a constitutional crisis. But nonetheless, experts believe that this is a failed coup, and in the future, you could see something that's a little more clever or strategic, which could certainly hang the Constitution, on this particular issue.
Yeah.
So it all hinges on Electoral College, which is really a relic of earlier foundation of the U.S. Constitution, and there will be, I think, some moves to undo the Electoral College in some way, structurally.
Yeah, I mean, the vote might go ahead, and as you say, the 306 and 232, those numbers will likely not move a lot. But the question is, it might be a failed coup, but what happens when Biden officially takes office on the 20th of January? If the last few weeks are anything to go by, where we saw certain states, leaders in certain states, facing real threats to their lives at their homes.
Yeah, it's a divided country. It's like, I think more than 72, close to 70, 73 million people voted for Mr. Trump. But Mr. Biden's lead is certainly by 7 million votes. So it's a significant lead. And the reason for that is the Democrats felt a significant threat to the mail-in ballot, which Mr. Trump announced repeatedly. And so people, voted early. They voted in person, and they made plans to vote in large numbers, right? So it's not a close election. Clearly, the Democrats did not win any more states in Senate or in Congress. And that's where the Georgia election runoff will be now fought. So it'll be a divisive first 2 years for Mr. Biden, if any indication we have from previous 8 years from Mr. Obama, where Mitch McConnell had blocked all initiatives by Mr. Obama, right, to get healthcare through, to get the economy going. So right now we're hanging on the unemployment issues as well as relief for the COVID health workers to give the second round of relief, and that's been held up by the Republicans. So if what we're seeing right now, I think Mr. Biden might have a tough time going in the first 2 years if he doesn't have the runoff advantage in Georgia.
Yeah. And we know from the last few months, Dr. Sharma, that President Trump and the people in the Republican Party, the people around him who have supported him in this attempt to undo what was a democratic election, is something that he's willing to do at all costs. If we look at the COVID-19 numbers in the US, almost 17 million cases, almost 307,000 people having died, and still President Trump blocking Biden and his team from those critical COVID-19 preparations that were meant to take place ahead of Biden taking over.
Yeah, and he's trying to take credit for the vaccine, which is now, I believe it's being now shipped from Pfizer and Moderna pharmaceuticals, an industry I know a little bit about because I've worked in it for almost a decade or so. So yeah, so it's clearly a rapid paced development of a vaccine within 6 to 9 months, and multiple, I think I would say, initiatives on the pharmaceutical side have been successfully completed, waiting approval. And so it's definitely a success story, and Mr. Trump is trying to take credit for it. But I think it's really as much an initiative of the pharma industry and the healthcare industry, which is highly employs a large number of immigrants and scientists and bench scientists who do the wet lab work, right? Yeah. So it's really the immigrants who are driving this innovation and innovation and development in the pharma sector, which is what the issue is with Trump administration, blocking immigrants. So just yesterday and today, there have been riots in DC where Proud Boys, conservative groups, white nationalists have been protesting in DC against blacks and Indians, and with threatening messages, eliciting violence. So this is what we're going to see in the last few days of the Trump administration. It began with a speech about American carnage, and we're ending it with, like you said, more than 300,000 people dead, while he's still trying to take credit for the vaccine.
Yeah, incredibly interesting stuff, to say the least. Dr. Dinesh Sharma, it's always a pleasure having you on the show. Thanks for staying up so late. He joins us from New York, where it's coming up for midnight. And of course, that is as we continue to track the story of the Electoral College vote, finally now taking place after a lot of drama that sees no end. The US elections, a developing story.